Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Webcast. My name is Christine Dursey-Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio Chapter of APA and Chair of the New Urbanism Division, and I am your Webcast moderator. Today is April 29th, and we will be hearing the presentation, Planning Ethics, Dealing with Problem Boards and Board Members. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your questions in the chat box found in the webcast toolbar to the right of your screen, or you can call the 1-800 number. And for your content questions related to the presentation, you can type those in the questions box, also located in the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen. And we will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. On your screen is a list of the sponsoring chapters and divisions for 2016. Thanks to all the participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible and free to their members. Today, in particular, our webcast is sponsored by the Connecticut Chapter. To learn more about the Connecticut Chapter, you can visit www.ccapa.org. Coming up on your screen will be a list of our upcoming webcasts. To register for these webcasts, just visit our webcast webpage at ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. And to log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, just visit planning.org and log into your My APA account. And then under your CM log, you can select Search for CM Activities. And then in that search bar, you can either type in today's event number or the title of today's webcast. And you can find both of those on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. And this webcast has been approved for 1.5 ethics credits for live viewing only. We do have some recorded webcasts that are available for distance education, and you can check out availability for that, again, on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. For sure, we definitely have one ethics session available for distance education and one law session available for those that need them in the next coming month. And like us on Facebook, Planning Webcast Series, to receive up-to-date information on our upcoming sessions. And we are recording today's webcast. It will be available on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube or visit youtube.com/planningwebcast. And a PDF of this PowerPoint will be available after the presentation ends, again, on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker, Casey Bailey, who will get us started today. Casey.
Great. Thank you, Christine. As Christine said, my name is Casey Bailey. I'm an associate attorney at Robinson & Cole in the Real Estate and Development Group in the Boston office. My practice focuses on advising clients on land use permitting and policy matters and on commercial real estate transactions. I also have a master's degree in urban planning from Florida State University and have worked as a planner in Florida before pursuing my legal career. I'm also currently a member of the Groveland, Massachusetts Zoning Board of Appeals. Joining me on the program today are Bob Mitchell, Nancy Latender, and Kristen Kasner. Bob is a fellow of the American Institute of Certified Planners and is the principal of his own consulting business in Boston, Massachusetts. He has over 30 years of experience at the state, regional, and local levels and with nonprofit organizations. He specializes in land use and zoning topics, comprehensive and strategic planning, and sustainable development. He provides training programs to public officials and professionals on land use, ethics, and meeting management topics, and has conducted ethics sessions at state, regional, and national planning conferences for more than 20 years. Bob has been the planning director for both Amherst, Massachusetts, and Burlington, Vermont, and he is the former special assistant for sustainable development for Massachusetts. He's also a past president of the Massachusetts Chapter of the American Planning Association and a former commissioner on the American Institute of Certified Planners Commission. Nancy is an attorney with the Cranston, Rhode Island firm of McGonigal Hance, PC, and a consultant with Mason and Associates Incorporated, which is an environmental and planning firm based in North Scituate, Rhode Island. She has over 18 years of experience as an attorney, focusing on municipal land use law, and has been an AICP certified planner since 2007. She has experience in all aspects of the land development, subdivision, and zoning approval processes, with particular interest in planning for housing and historical and cultural resource preservation. Ms. Latender has been extensively involved with Rhode Island land use policy, including the land use review and comprehensive planning processes, low and moderate income housing, and rural and urban agriculture. As a planning educator, she has worked with the Grow Smart Rhode Island on the development and presentation of land use training programs for the past 15+ years. Nancy is the immediate past president of the Rhode Island chapter of the American Planning Association and is admitted to practice law in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And last but not least is Kristen Kasner. She is an AICP member with 15 years of municipal planning experience. She is currently the planning director for the town of Burlington, Massachusetts, a suburb 15 miles northwest of Boston, and serving a daytime population of over 130,000 people. In her role as planning director, she has been involved in permitting and master plan initiatives. And since 2010, she has also coordinated the AICP exam prep, including the AICP Code of Ethics. Kristen also is currently serving as president of the Massachusetts chapter of the American Planning Association. Can we have the next slide, please? Great. We're going to begin our presentation today with Bob, who will provide us an overview of the AICP Code of Ethics, and we'll discuss some of the recent changes to the code that were adopted as of April 1st of this year. We will then present actually two hypothetical scenarios, each presenting a situation where a board member has quote-unquote gone rogue and requiring the town planner to react to such a situation. Each video is going to be followed by a few interactive polling multiple choice questions. We'll be asking you to select an answer choice that you think is best, and we will be able to see in real time how the audience views the issues that are raised by each video. The panelists will then discuss the video and discuss how the code applies to the situation presented in the video, and we will also leave time at the end for you to submit your questions to the panelists. And with that, I'd like to go to the next slide and turn things over to Bob to provide an overview of the code.
Thank you, Casey, and welcome to all our listeners on this webcast to today's session on ethics and the interesting scenarios we have that relate to behavior not just of the planner but of our planning commissioners and our planning boards. Before we get into the code, some background advice and information. Next slide, please. So this session does provide general information, general overview of the AICP Code of Ethics, and we will talk about some sections in more specificity, but we won't go into every single word in the entire code. Reviewing the code and talking about and looking at ethical scenarios and having a question and answer session that we will be doing today are all important aspects of understanding the code and the aspects of the code and when it applies and how it applies and if it applies. But you should understand that the Ethics Committee, the APA Ethics Committee, is the authorized body to give formal advice or informal advice, and that's one of the changes that has happened to the code recently, and we're going to on ethical questions and on ethical situations. So if you have a specific ethics situation in your office or planners you know or work with, you should consider contacting the APA ethics officer, and that person can provide either informal or formal advice. Now, Webster's dictionary defines ethics as a system or a code of morals of a particular person, group, or profession. And we're a profession, and we have our own code. And Mark Twain once mentioned that we should always do right because this will gratify some people and astonish the rest. Well, we're, as planners in the planning profession, we should always do right. That's really the foundation of our organization and our profession in terms of being open, transparent, and ethical. One of the things about our code, which was originally established back in the early 80s and has evolved since, and most recently evolved at the APA conference in Phoenix when the AICP Commission adopted some new provisions and reorganized it somewhat, is that there's a little bit of a unique aspect to our code that you don't find in every code that you read on ethics, whether it's an organization or a state code or a community's code. Our code includes aspirational principles as well as the rules. The rules are the to-dos and to-don'ts, and not taking bribes or not acting with conflict of interest, which is usually the normal aspect of ethics code. But we have a lot of aspirational principles that encourage us to act based on our highest standards. It also presents us with balancing tests that we will find in today's videos. Not all of the principles and rules stand alone. They sometimes work with each other. They sometimes might be in conflict with each other. There are gray areas here in terms of determining what the best actions are based on an ethical problem. In today's session, as you will see in the videos, is also a little bit different in that the focus is not just on the professional planner in terms of what she should be doing and shouldn't be doing and whether she's behaving badly or not, but it's also on the behavior of the planning commissioners. And all of those of us who work with boards and commissions know that sometimes their behavior is not the best. So what is the role and responsibility and obligation of the professional planner when you have, as Casey mentioned, rogue planning commissioners? And based on that, while we're going to focus on the code, we should not forget that APA also has an ethical principles of planning that's a guide to ethical conduct for everyone in the planning world and in the planning community, including our citizen planners. But it also has language specifically directed towards practicing planners and encouraging us to maintain and increase our competencies as well as encourage respect for the profession that we are in. Next slide, please. So the code, as now adopted as of April 1st, has 5 sections. And the first two are the two that are in some ways the most important because they are the sections that will be used most often. While there are procedures for complaints, ethics charges and ethics complaints and disciplinary actions, we are fortunate as a profession that those aren't used all that often. So Section A is the aspirational principles, and they are the ideals to which we are committed, and we will talk about that in a little bit more detail. Section B are the rules of conduct, the do's and don'ts that I have mentioned, and what it means to violate those rules and regulations. Section C was revised as part of the new changes adopted by the Commission on April 1st. It contains the procedural provisions of the code and how to obtain advisory opinions, including either formal advisory opinions or informal advisory opinions. Section D is now the new section that has how complaints of misconduct are handled, how they are investigated, and what the decision-making process is related to complaints of misconduct. And finally, Section E is a new section, but it includes language, at least some language that was in previous sections of the code, and that is the discipline of members, particularly any members who commit serious crimes. And there is now a whole series of specific disciplinary actions for ethical misconduct and what constitutes serious crimes. And then there's a whole tiered section of what the Ethics Committee or the ethics officer can impose in terms of punishment. Next slide, please. So focusing in on our aspirational principles, the aspirational principles have three major sections in terms of our overall responsibilities: our responsibility to the public, our responsibility to our clients and to our employers, and our responsibility to our profession and to our colleagues. The responsibility to the public is our primary obligation is to serve the public interest. And if you look at codes, whether it's state codes, ethics codes, or city ethics codes, or other organizations, you often see protecting, serving the public interest is our overarching goal here. So everything kind of falls under that umbrella of serving the public interest. I'm not going to read all of these. You can see these on the screen. These will come into play as we talk about and listen to and watch the videos, but certainly be conscious of the rights of others, looking at long-range consequences, accurate information, clear information. That's a very important aspect of what we do. Social justice in all of the kinds of work that we do. Excellence in design. Dealing fairly with people. We talk about dealing fairly with people, transparently, being open in the planning process. And next slide, please. So our responsibility to clients and employers: diligent, creative, competent performance, but consistent with our public interest. Again, protecting and serving the public interest. And you can see the three main points that you find in the code under this category: independent judgment, conflict of interest in not doing things that are illegal or inconsistent with our public interest. Next slide, please. And then we have a responsibility to ourselves, to our profession, to our colleagues. We should contribute to the development, knowledge, respect for our profession by improving our skills, by working to help educate and teach and mentor other professors, other planners, younger planners, educate the public about the planning issues, be fair, and contribute time and resources to professional development of others. So those are our three overarching topics under aspirational principles. And next, we have a couple more here for profession and colleagues. Again, trying to make sure underrepresented groups are part of our work. Education and training, analyzing ethical issues in our planning practice. How do we talk about ethics in our offices? How do we talk about ethics with our boards and commissions that we may work with, or our clients? And this is definitely an aspect of the videos you will see today. Next slide, please. There are 26 rules of conduct. I'm not going to go over these. You certainly can click on the apaplanning.org website and pull up the ethics code and read all of them. But some of the important ones we pulled out just to highlight. Again, providing adequate, clear, accurate information. Don't taking assignments that might violate the rules of the ethics code or be even illegal. confidential information, how we handle that, not engaging in private conversations that are inappropriate to the process, not coercing or directing other professionals to come out with findings that aren't supported by the evidence, and not doing anything really that would embarrass our profession or that would adversely affect our profession. So moving on to the next slide. As I mentioned, Section C was rewritten, Section D was rewritten, and Section E is a new section. Section C is the advisory opinions. So the overall goals for the changes that were adopted a few weeks ago were to reduce the complexity in the complaint process and the procedures when the charge was filed. It was had a considerably bureaucratic aspect to it, and we're trying to make that a smoother process. It also is trying to make it a much shorter process. It was rather lengthy time it took to get through complaints. So those have been reduced. The number of steps for decision making and appeals has been reduced. An important one is an increased emphasis on education and remediation when there is an ethical problem, instead of just on punishment. And so there is much more language about educating someone, working with a planner that may have run into an ethics problem, rather than just looking at the punishment aspect of it. Again, making this less legalistic, we have been eliminating the prosecutorial role of the hearing officer, and now there's an increased role for both the ethics committee and the ethics officer. Much more emphasis on settlement efforts instead of, again, punishment efforts, and how to settle these things in a little more comprehensive manner. There are now specific discipline levels for everything from just getting a letter of admonition to being expelled from AICP. And then a lot of increased communication. We'll be seeing ethics advisory opinions will be published by the Ethics Committee and the AICP Commission, so everybody can look at what's coming down on the ethics world. Next slide. And then just quickly, Section C is now the advisory opinions, how those are made, informal or informal. Section D is how the complaints are adjudicated, how you file a complaint, how they're settled, how they're appealed, and then Section E is discipline. And with that, I'll turn it back to Casey.
Great, thank you, Bob. Let's now turn to the hypotheticals. Christine, can we have the next slide? Great. So this will work. We'll play the video, and the first scenarios are going to be discussed by Kristen, so we'll take it from there. The videos that we've put together are intended to be somewhat comical, but are also designed to present the scenario in a very overt way, so that it raises a number of topics for discussion. We realize that this may seem a little over the top in some circumstances, but we thought it was the best way to raise the issues for discussion, and some of these are based on real-life experiences. I'm also told, because of the number of people that we have on the webinar today, that it might take a little bit of time to stream the whole video on your computer. We just ask that you exercise a little patience, and we'll try to recap after the video. So at the next slide, go ahead and cue it up. Thank you.
Scene is the Town of Vista View Planning Board hearing room. The chair, Ronnie Roughshot, and 4 other members of the board are at the table. In the audience are several members of the public and the applicant, Billy Baker, seeking approval of a new Billy Baker's Donut Depot, along with the applicant's consultants. The town planner, Robin Rexrow, is seated at the end of the table.
Good
Good evening, Mr. Chair. We only have one application this evening, site plan approval for Billy Baker's proposed new donut depot at 345 Main Street.
Good. Well, we'll be out here quickly this evening so I can make my annual bowling league banquet. I see the board's all here, so let's get going. Now, there's no rules for these hearings, as you know, but I've been doing this for 23 years, so I know what to do. What's going to happen is Billy Baker's going to have 5 minutes to present her application. Okay? And then we've all read the files. We don't need any more time than that. After that, we'll take comments from the public, but I want everybody out there to realize that you only get 1 minute to talk. Okay? It doesn't do anybody any good to have people just keep rolling on and on. And don't repeat yourself. If you do that, I'm going to have to stop you. And I have my timer, so be aware of that. The town planner and I, and a couple of board members, have gone over the file in detail. And we have 6 conditions that we impose that we think are going to make the application acceptable to the board. Now, my understanding is that the applicant has agreed to those 6 conditions. Is that correct?
Yes, I agree. But, excuse me, I have a few questions I'd like to ask regarding the application.
Well, I'm sorry that you didn't get a chance to read the application before this meeting, but we're pretty much all set. Unless you completely disagree with what's in the application, I think we can move on. The 6 conditions that we've imposed cover things like making sure that the waste is protected against raccoon infestation. We've required more parking spaces that are being required. And, you know, Donut Depot's agreed to hold an annual fundraiser for our volunteer fire department. Does the applicant have anything more to present other than the application as submitted or the 6 conditions?
Excuse me, just probably, I still have some concerns about this plan. I looked at the stormwater management plan pretty closely when I was here last month because I had to catch up. And I think that preparing for a 5-year storm event is simply inadequate. We've had flooding along Main Street before, as you well remember, and I don't see why we should have settled for a 5-year stormwater management plan when a 25-year stormwater plan would be done, or even a 100-year stormwater management plan would be by far better. Let's support a 25-year plan. I don't think we need to have.
The town engineer looked at this, and apparently he didn't have any problem. Now, maybe after we approve the plan, you could meet with Billy Baker on your own and have her do whatever revisions to the stormwater management plan she needs to do to satisfy your concerns. But for right now, I'm satisfied. We didn't hear anything negative from the town engineer on this, so I think we can move on to approval very quickly. They did a really great job at the other Donut Depot, so I'm sure we're not going to have any problems here.
And I agree. We don't really have any formal presentation plans. We have our consultant here, and we send them on the questions, but no.
Okay, then we'll go to the public. Anybody in the public have any questions or comments for or against the plan? And make sure that you keep them on that. Hi, I'm Elsie Barlow. I live at 198 Main Street, Broadway, Lane. I'm president of the Breakfast and Lunch nonprofit group. Here I'm working to preserve the wetlands on our site. I have a few conditions that you can agree with. I agree with the board member who spoke about the stormwater management plan. I would request that the hearing be from us that we review the conditions and bring our own experts and talk about what we think that plan is function. You can bet yourself dollars to donuts, if I can use that expression, that we're not going to continue this hearing. We reviewed the application for 3 months. We had a pre-application meeting with the applicant, and the applicant has a great track record in town. I don't think anybody would argue with the idea that there's nothing to be gained from continuing this hearing. There's not going to be any negative effect on the marsh, and the project, you know, is going to easily need board approval, I'm sure. With that, I'd like to close the hearing, open our deliberations, and vote for the project. Does the town planner have anything else?
So thank you, Casey, as well as getting us transitioned in the video. And I realized the audio on the video was not terrific, so I'll quickly recap as we go into the first couple questions. in which we'll be asking the participants to answer some poll questions that we'll be discussing. So this was a public meeting, a public hearing about the approval of the donut shop. Clear, the chairman was stated that there's no rules adopted by the board, and he is the professional, as he claims, because he has 23 years, and he stated kind of the ad hoc rules. There was discussion about conditions that were outside of the public session, and it seems like there was discussion and deliberation outside of the public session. And he clearly did not provide board members or public adequate time for questions, and was dismissing very legitimate questions from the public as well as other board members about stormwater concerns. So moving on to the question, we're asking which principle is most at issue in this scenario. Aspirational principle 1E, give people opportunity to have meaningful impact on plans and programs. Aspirational principle 1H, deal fairly with participants in the planning process. Rule of conduct 9, we shall not engage in private discussions with decision makers in the planning process in any manner prohibited by law or by agency rules, procedures, or custom. Procedural rule 14, we shall not use the power of any office to seek or obtain a special advantage that is not a matter of public knowledge or is not in the public interest. And procedural rule 18, we shall not direct or coerce other professionals to make analysis or reach findings not supported by available evidence. So I'll take a minute as people are weighing in on the question.
This is Christine. I'm just going to give it a few more seconds. We have about half the folks have voted so far. Okay, I'm going to close it up and then show the results.
Excellent. Okay, so we have a variety of options which we expected. There, as the introduction to the code states, that an ethical judgment often requires a conscientious balancing based on the facts and context of a particular situation and on the precepts of the entire code. So there are many aspects of the code which come into play here, which is shown in the polling process, and we'll discuss specifically what those aspects are after we go on to the second question. So we can go to the next slide. So question 2, what should Rob and Retro have done to resolve this problem? As mentioned, the code extends not just to us as professional planners, but also those of us or those elected and appointed officials that are practicing planning. So as Bob mentioned earlier, that there are certainly things that the meeting itself, the chairman, as other meeting members of the board could have done differently, but also what is the role of the professional planner in this situation? Should she have stopped the meeting? Should she draft rules of procedure for the board to adopt to prevent the situation in the future? Should she talk to the chair after the meeting? Should she conduct a meeting management training session for the board? Or are there other options that she could have taken?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close up the poll now and show the results.
Excellent. I'm very interested to see that that so many people chose that she should have stopped the meeting. It's a very powerful professional planner they have there. Just as the previous question, there are a lot of options, and she should probably, in many ways, do a little bit of all of them, depending on the situation and our personal relationship. Kind of how, without rules, it's hard to see really where the how the professional planner and the board interact. So, an excellent grouping of responses here. And let's move on to the next slide, the AICP ethical principles involved. So as was mentioned, many of the principles and the rules of conduct are at play here, but specifically we wanted to discuss a few. The first is the aspirational principle, our overall responsibility to the public, and to be conscious of the right of others, provide timely, adequate, clear, and accurate information. Aspirational principle 1E, give people opportunity to have meaningful impact on plans and programs that may affect them, and deal fairly with all participants in the planning process. As the video demonstrated, that the chairman clearly did not give people adequate time to be part of the process, and there was evidence that there was potentially discussion outside of the public hearing process. So, and it was unclear as to whether all of the information, everyone had all the information. So the second major piece was our responsibility to the profession and colleagues to educate the public about the planning issues at hand. And lastly, the rule of conduct number 1, we shall not fail to provide adequate, timely, clear, and accurate information on the planning issues in front of us. Bob and Nancy, do you have anything to add to this discussion?
Well, I thought it was, okay.
Sorry, Bob. Hello, folks. This is Nancy Latender. I would just like to say that when you find yourself in a meeting of this type, it's really important to have prepared well for the public hearing and for the deliberation process. I'm assuming that there was a lot more information that the members of the board had available to them that perhaps Robin Retro could refer them to kind of get them back on track with regard to the particular planning issues. Again, seeking for adequate, clear, and accurate information. Certainly training would have been very helpful. If that opportunity exists, I suggest that everyone seek that out when at all possible. Thank you.
I was just going to say that the largest response was Robin Retro should have stopped the meeting. And in the abstract, I think that's probably one of the best options, and to not stop the meeting to chastise the chair for a bad behavior, but to just explain to the whole commission their responsibilities under a public hearing process in terms of keeping the public hearing open, to take all of the testimony, not taking testimony outside the hearing, to get all the information on the record, to be able to answer questions that people have, legitimate questions. However, I know, and I'm sure many of you know, that depending how big a bully the chair is, they may not take kindly to the planner sitting in the corner trying to interfere with how he wants to run the meeting. And so it may be the case that you have to be very delicate about how you approach this problem, and it may be multiple steps, kind of explaining at the meeting the responsibilities of the commission, but after the meeting or perhaps at another session, speaking with the commission in terms of how to run a public hearing that meets the public hearing requirements of your state and is ethical and open, so that you can get the other commissioners to actually be allies for holding an open and transparent meeting, even if the bully chair doesn't want to do that. So one way of approaching this is to look for allies among the commission to get them to step up to have an appropriate public hearing.
And I would agree with Bob as well that to remind board members of the ethical practices. But also, one of the questions or answers reflected that to have rules and procedures that ensure that ethical practices are respected will also help avoid situations like this, and the situation where there may be a bully chairman that needs to have a rules and procedures will help to alleviate those concerns. Well, thank you. I think we can move on to the second hypothetical.
The scene is the town planner's office in the town hall of the town of Vista View. The town planner, Robin Restro, seated at a desk, and across from the planner is a board member, Luke Lips and Ships.
Hello, Luke. How are you? Always good to see you.
Good to see you too. I thought I would come by and chat with you. I appreciate the due process and ethics training you provided to the board last year, and I'm sensitive, maybe overly sensitive, to the problems that can come from those casual encounters that we all have.
I'm glad you found the training useful, and even more so that you'd like to come chat with me about it. What's on your mind?
Last month, as you know, we closed the public hearing on the Stevenson application for the big box store at the corner of Elm Street and Maple Street. Yesterday, I was at the grocery store, and Mickey Green happened to be next to me, picking up the same pile of avocados, and started to chat with me about the proposed store. Mickey told me the traffic engineer was wrong, because Mickey and her friends had gone out and done their own traffic counts at the peak hour, and counted virtually twice as many cars as the traffic engineer said there were presently. On top of that, Mickey was very upset about the testimony she had read about in the paper as the traffic engineer, and said a review of the accident report revealed that there had been no serious accidents at Elm Street and Maple Street. Mickey reminded me, and I guess I remember it now, that Maggie's nephew Hector was killed in a motorcycle crash there back when we were in high school. I think that's right.
What did you tell me?
That the hearing is closed, and we can only consider evidence introduced at the hearing.
The motorcycle crash is part of your independent knowledge. Is that right? That's a tough one. If Mickey had not reminded you, do you think you'd remember on your own?
I think so, most likely. We can't say so for sure. Mickey also told me that her brother-in-law, who works at the bank, told her that the applicant's limited liability corporation is on the verge of bankruptcy, and that there's speculation that there's no intention of actually building the project that they said they would, and they'd be most likely forced to flip it for those discount operators. In short, even though the applicant promised we're going to get high-end retailer, it looks like we're going to have something far different from this. Mickey said that she's going to email this information to the other board members.
You didn't encourage Mickey to communicate in any way with the board members, did you?
No, of course not. I know from your training that these types of communications are not allowed. But now that I think about it, I don't think I specifically told Mickey not to email the other board members. It just nodded my head in acknowledgement. I hope she doesn't think I was encouraging her.
It's sometimes difficult to react in the spur of the moment. How did your conversation end?
Mickey said she thought the neighbors who lived right to the rear of the site, you know the family, the Greenbriers, have just discovered TCE in their well, which I can only imagine came from the dry cleaners that used to be on the proposed development site. I think there may be some information available on the State Department of Environmental Protection. Anyways, I think the whole thing is a mess. For now, you know all I know. I just don't know what to do. We're set to deliberate and vote on the application next week.
Well, in this encounter between a planning board member and a citizen in a grocery store, there has obviously been discussion regarding a matter that's currently under consideration by a planning board. And it seems equally clear that there is an effort being made to persuade Luke Lips Sink Ships to vote against a project. All the elements of a ex parte communication are therefore present in that grocery store encounter. Now, there are several topics that are mentioned in that conversation. The traffic study, accident records, the financial health of the LLC, and then I think some environmental considerations were also brought up. The planner is being asked by the planning board member, how do I wade through this mess? The 3 questions that follow focus on communication between the planner and the board member. Next slide. Oh, question 1. Question 1, which principal rule of conduct is most at issue in this scenario? Obviously, more than one may be applicable, but which one is most at issue? No private discussions prohibited by law. Provide timely, clear information on issues to people. Always be conscious of the rights of others and deal fairly with all participants in the process. Please vote.
Just going to give it a few more seconds, and then I'll close it up and show the results.
No private discussions prohibited by law. Certainly, there is 100% certainty here that there is an ex parte contact that took place in the grocery store. I think dealing fairly with all participants in the process may be the issue that is most present here in the interaction between the planner and the board member. Next question. Where did Robin Retro go wrong here? She should have provided better training. She kept asking questions about the encounter. She didn't explain that he shouldn't use this information at the hearing. And she didn't clarify ex parte issue to the member. Please vote. And the results, 58%. She didn't clarify ex parte issue to the member. And the runner-up didn't explain that he shouldn't use this information at the hearing. I think both are substantially right answers. Again, the focus of this scenario is on communication between the planner and the board member, particularly at this point in time when a hearing is pending. Now we have a 3rd question in this hypothetical. What should Robin Retro do next? She should inform the other board members of this situation. She should just inform the chair of this situation. She should consult with the city attorney. She should ask Mr. Sinkships to recuse himself, or other. Please vote. She should consult the city attorney. Always a go-to answer, is it not? She should ask Mr. Sinkships to recuse himself. Well, I believe that, again, communication with this board member is a good way to focus in on this question. Therefore, I would pick other. Syncships may not have a legal need to recuse himself, depending on the jurisdiction. And his participation appears to be very valuable. He seems to be a valuable board member. So perhaps the discussion that Robin Recho needs to have with the board member is regarding the value and the relevance of the information that he received during this grocery store encounter. It could be that in the long run, they feel that the information received about the traffic study was simply lay opinion and would be not persuasive. The need to double check or clarify the accident records may be something they could do internally, and then decide whether or not that information should really be on the record, and then consult the city attorney as to what to do at that point. And as to the applicant's financial health and the environmental issues, well, it's likely that they are not relevant to the situation, but we don't know the extent of it, but certainly Robin should know. So the ethical principles involved here. We planners deal every day with the rights of others. Due process requires a balance of the rights of the individual with the rights of the public. So I think the next question would be, was accurate information the subject of that conversation? Are we certain that the information on the traffic accident and the financial health of the company is accurate? That should be pursued before any determination is made. The public hearing was the opportunity given for the meaningful impact on the plans, and the grocery store encounter was ex parte. So I don't believe there's any that principle was run afoul. H, ex parte has little value to the planning process because it is unfair to those who aren't present in the grocery store. So if we're going to deal fairly with all participants, we know we need to be astutely aware of what's going on in ex parte situation. Our responsibility to our profession and our colleagues is to educate the public in the planning process. There might be opportunity to do that here. Syncships could have done that in the grocery store, or Robin Recho could continue that conversation with the members of the board on another occasion. And it's important to a fair and reasonable decision making. That process has a lot of value in that regard. Finally, rules of conduct. I think B1, Rule 1 and Rule 8 are of equal relevance to this situation. So I invite Bob and Kristen. Do you care to add anything to this discussion?
One of the aspects of this that I think we all as planners run into is being stopped in the produce section of the grocery store by citizens that want to talk about an upcoming public hearing, and we know our planning commissioners or zoning board members get waylaid in the grocery store or the drugstore in the same manner. So it's just a fact of life we have to deal with. And while I know some communities that have in their rules and regulations very explicit language for their boards and commissions to immediately say, I can't talk to you about this topic. If you want to get your comments out there, come to the public hearing or submit written testimony to the planning board or the zoning board or whoever, and we will consider it that way when everybody is in the audience and becomes aware of what your comments are. The problem is, of course, we're dealing with human beings and human behavior, and some board and commission members just love to talk and listen, and then some citizens are pretty intent on not being quiet and not coming to the hearing and just trying to get their point across in the grocery store. So other communities I know have a policy where if that does happen at the hearing, the board member reports it and says, on such and such date, I ran into so-and-so at the grocery store and they said the following things. I just want that on the record that that happened. I'm not going to take that into consideration as part of the deliberation here because it didn't happen within the hearing, but at least gets it out there that it happened and it's on the record, and then people can't suspect that these ex parte communications are influencing the decisions of the board. So that's one aspect of it.
So I would very much agree, and that the best answer when you get stopped in the grocery store and anywhere else for that matter is to encourage people to voice their concerns, but please come to the public hearing that we have posted for X day. And one of the things that is helpful if they can come to the public hearing or submit information to the process is that then that information through the board and through the planning professionals can be checked for accuracy and timeliness, and just make sure that if that information is to be considered, that it is accurate information and it's not just someone's opinion of something or a layperson rather than a professional opinion on something that may need that additional expertise.
And this is Casey jumping. I wonder, Bob or Nancy or Kristen, if you could talk a little bit more about how the informing the other board members might happen. Bob mentioned that it was best to do it during a public hearing where you can disclose. One of the sample answers we had for question 3 was, should the planner go to the other board members directly? I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how that might work and whether that would be advisable under the code.
I think it's the obligation of the board member in the first instance to do the reporting, if you will, and the reporting, again, to me, should be at the hearing, so it's on the record, gets in the minutes, and it's there for everybody who's sitting at the hearing to hear about and to understand and for the board member to be clear. If the Robin Retro only sends an email or something to the other board members and say, oh, by the way, Mr. Luke Lips thinks ships, got into this big conversation at the grocery store, just wanted to let you know, that still leaves the situation unresolved as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and it leaves it also to be hearsay information. It's one person said something, and how accurate is that information? So I think the planner has a role to play in reminding people of what to do in that situation, and that they should encourage people to come to the public hearing to get the information on record, so we can in fact use that information with all the other information submitted and kind of figure it out in a fair way. What that all means. So, Nancy?
I think it's important for the planner to sit down with the board member and go over the information that he seems to have received, and let's make a determination on the relevancy of that information. Because if you are going to go back, and I believe in this case need to open up the record, open up the public hearing to allow additional information, it would be nice to focus the attention of the committee on what's relevant and simply set aside more anecdotal information.
I think that's another important aspect of this case, where there's seemingly new information, some of which anyway is important to the decision-making process, that was unknown, and so now what does the planner do with that information, or what does the planner do because they've gotten an indication that there's important information that should somehow be entered into the process. So again, doing sort of the planner's due diligence, do they then pursue finding out more about this new information and then bringing it to the board to perhaps reopen the hearing to take additional information so that the record is more complete and that the decision will have a more substantial foundation based on all of the facts.
This is Casey jumping in again. I think one of the other key parts of this scenario is right at the beginning where Luke Lifting Ships comes in and mentions that the planner had conducted a training session for the board to educate them about ex parte communications. That said, she might have needed to have multiple trainings so that her board was continually being familiarized with the issue, but the obligation to educate the board as to what their obligations are and how to deal with these types of situations is I think, an important aspect of this scenario.
Along that line, one of the things, as in all of these kinds of scenarios, is the answer is usually to take multiple steps to fix the mess or to make sure it doesn't happen again. One of the things that I've recommended with the different commissions and boards that I've dealt with is that when, particularly with a public hearing, kind of goes off the rail for whatever reason, it may not even have anything to do with ethics, but it may have some ethical issues, that sometime later, after the decision's been made and if there are any appeals, everything's done, that the board actually take some time at a future meeting and just do a debrief of what happened and why did it go so bad, and get the board to focus on what steps they could have taken to avoid the mess. And because what happens is they're on to the next project, they're on to the next permit, they're on to the next plan, and they've forgotten, what happened and what caused the mess until you get to the 6 months later, you're in the same mess again. So, trying to get boards to focus, one way to do that is to do a debriefing session sometime later down the road to rethink what happened.
I would agree. If you don't acknowledge the issue, you haven't learned from your mistake. I think one of the things, the most important things to get out of this is what Nancy mentioned when she was talking about the ethical principles, is that ex parte equals unfair. It does not allow participants in the planning process to have, a fair opportunity to be heard. So just ex parte equals, unfair in the planning process. I think was a great, just very simple way to think about it.
And of course, today in the world of social media and email and everything, ex parte is no longer just running into somebody in the grocery store and having a conversation. Boards and commissions get into trouble because they're getting emails from citizens about the upcoming public hearing, and sometimes they're sending emails back and forth on a dialogue about the upcoming public hearing, or posting on, Facebook or whatever. And of course, all of that is outside of the open hearing process and open meeting laws of states. And so we have to think about, the whole social media aspect of ex parte communication as well nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that comes up a lot, whether it be, the high school Facebook page or something, or the PTA Facebook group or mom's group, or that, board members may be involved in that. A project might come up, and often someone will say something and board members may say, oh, well, I had to defend myself. Well, if we're talking about an application that's under review with the board, it's ex parte communication that's not happening at the public meeting. So there's a lot of shades of gray that you can get into, that you really have to be clear with the board members what ex parte communication is, and what Bob mentioned, that it includes all of these things, not just meeting them in the grocery store, but Facebook groups, chats, anything. Even if they want to write the record, then they should make a statement at a public hearing, but not engage in dialogue on Facebook groups or other types of social media.
Before we return this back to Kristen, I believe for some Q&A, I would just like to conclude by adding that as professionals, our ethical responsibilities and our legal responsibilities in these situations are pretty much in sync. So while calling the town solicitor, I believe calling the town solicitor at some point would probably be a good step to take, but we also need to take steps as professionals to try to get to doing the right thing at that point in time. So, Kristen, are we ready for Q&A?
This
Yes,
is Casey. I'll take it. Can we go to the next slide, Christine? Great. I just wanted to extend my thanks to our panelists who've provided us some great stories and good wisdom for your future planning. And we're happy to take questions, which you can submit in the chat box. And Christine will feed those to us when she receives any.
Yep, they're starting to come in now, so we'll go ahead and get started. First question: are cases and decisions of the AICP Ethics Committee available to AICP members for review as an educational tool?
Under the changes that have been made, the Ethics Committee will have advisory opinions. They obviously can't put out the specific decision with names and everything of certain people. For some cases, there is some confidentiality involved, but they will take the situation and create advisory opinions based on that situation that they will publish. It will be on the website, and it may be in some other publications of APA and AICP. So that's one of the aspects that the Commission wants to beef up, so people are aware of what kinds of ethical complaints or decisions are happening at the national level.
Okay, next question. My planning board is very friendly. Hold on one second, let me see. Let's go with this one. For the scenario for our second hypothetical, would the financial health of the applicant actually be relevant?
This is Nancy. More likely, no. Most likely, it would not be relevant. Whether the ownership of a particular project and its business plan and anything goes along, like the quality of the retail outlet, etc., is most likely not relevant to any of the land use issues that you are pursuing.
Okay, thank you. If any of you have any idea about this question, how many planners have in their contract a clause that they must follow the code of ethics? Does anyone know of any communities that require something like that?
Could you repeat that question, Christine?
Sure. The question is, how many planners have in their contract a clause that they must follow the code of ethics?
Yeah, I've never heard that. I've never heard that question before, so I've never heard an answer to that question. That's a great question.
I think an employer would have to be really well informed to request that of a planner who's entering into a contract. In every city and town throughout the country, they generally, the planner is a public official and therefore would be subject to any code of ethics that is imposed by the state, which is the only code of ethics that is imposed on the municipality. So that's probably would be a relevant consideration in employment. But if an employer knows about the AICP Code of Ethics, I think that's a good employer.
Yeah, but however, I would argue that if the employer is requiring that you are AICP certified to hold the job, that to be AICP certified requires you to uphold the AICP Code of Ethics. So it may not say it in the contract that you have with your employer, but if your employer is requiring that you be AICP, I think it comes with the territory and requirement.
Just a little quick story that's sort of the flip side of that. I know of a planner who's a planning director who was being asked by their boss, who I believe was a city manager, to undertake actions that the planner felt would force him to violate the code. They were AICP, and he was very concerned about being asked to do things he felt would violate the code. What he did was he got his he printed out the AICP code, actually framed it, mounted it in his office, and the next time the manager came in to ask him to do something that made him very uncomfortable, he handed the manager the code and said, I belong to AICP, we have this code of ethics, this is the code, and what you've been asking me to do, I feel is a violation of, this section, that section, and the other section. Now, he was a little nervous doing that because, he thought his job might be on the line. But fortunately, the manager said, oh, I had no idea that there was such a code. And he read it, and he said, oh, this is pretty impressive, and I didn't realize I was asking you to violate sections of the code. So in this situation, it was presenting the code to the organization and saying, we have a code, and I have to follow it, so don't ask me to violate it. And in that case, all's well that ended well, because he kept his job and the manager backed off.
I think this is Christine. That's a great point. And there were some questions related to that. For those of us that follow the AICP Code of Ethics, we work every day with people who might not have a set of ethics to follow and who might not know that we have a set of ethics to follow. And in trying to deal with them on a day-to-day basis can be difficult. That's an interesting story. There's a couple questions about educating your boards and commissions on their role, the importance of their role, and things like that. So are there any online works available that can help planners guide their boards and commissions in an ethical way for training purposes?
There's a variety of information online. A couple I'll just mention. One, at the National APA Conference every year, there's always an ethics session for planning commissioners. And so the information from those are on the APA website from past conferences, and the Phoenix conference PowerPoints will be online, I think, by mid-May, I think they said. So there's that kind of information. A variety of states have their own state ethics commissions, and a lot of them produce PowerPoints for local public officials about ethics. Now, a lot of that's sort of conflict of interest and don't take bribes kind of things, but some of them are a little more expansive, and you should, and you don't even have to be in the state. I mean, Massachusetts, we have an ethics commission. I know Pennsylvania does, and Oregon does, and a whole variety of states. You can just go, Google state ethics commissions and look at their websites, and you'll find PowerPoints and even handouts and kinds of things like that. And so there is out there's a variety of state training organizations for public officials and planning boards that sometimes do ethics sessions. I know here in Massachusetts we have what's called the Citizen Planner Training Collaborative that puts on sessions at various times during the year for planning boards and zoning boards and planners and building inspectors and all of those, and a whole variety of training on how to run meetings and how to be ethical and how to know what the zoning laws are and all those kinds of things. So again, there's a number of state, some of them associated with APA chapters, that provide training, and a lot of that information is probably on their websites as well.
In addition to ethics laws, if your state has open meetings laws or access to public records laws or FOIA laws, and there are trainings on those are equally relevant to the types of situations that you have with boards.
Okay, thank you. In our second hypothetical, in the case of the ex parte communication, can the board member who receives the information send the content to the board or to the planning director in advance of the hearing instead of waiting until the hearing to announce it?
Again, I would vet through that information with the town planner before I would make it available. Yes, it could be imparted to the other members of the board ahead of schedule, but if the public hearing has actually been closed, it could not enter into their consideration unless that public hearing was reopened.
And just as a basic tenet, I would discourage that board members send anything to other board members to ensure that they don't begin a conversation that will have ex parte communication. So just the one-way street from the planner to the board member to the planner is always an advisable way to go.
Yeah, my concern about having the Mr. Loose Lips sending an email or whatever to all the other board members about what he heard before the hearing now puts that information in their mind, and now they are thinking about information that came through an ex parte communication, and try as they might, some of them probably may be influenced by that. Whereas if the board member just announces it at the hearing, then the other board members haven't had a chance to be thinking about it ahead of time. And it's the attempt at the purpose at the hearings to say, this happened, we're not going to consider it, we're done with it, and we're moving on to the other evidence. And so it should be quick and short and simple and be done with. And of course, the other danger with sending emails to people, to the other board members, is one of them may want to start responding. And then now you've got sort of a serial conversation going on about ex parte communication. A lot of dangers there, I think.
An ex parte communication about ex parte communication.
Okay, next question. Is it important for a planner to get anything on the record when planning commission or elected officials continue to do things their way and resist advisement from the planner?
I'll take a stab at that first. I think if you find yourself with a rogue commission that is going to do what they're going to do regardless of the sage advice that the professional planner gives them, there's really not much you can do to stop them. But there's makes a lot more work for you, and I think it's up to the planner, with or without support of their legal counsel, to make a good record and make an extra effort to put into the record that information which is most important, the accurate, that's been gleaned from the right public process, to ensure that even the board that's not listening to the professional planner has a record upon which they can rely to make a sound decision.
Well, following up on what Nancy just said, if you have a rogue commission and not just a rogue member, then you really have a problem, and that's a really uncomfortable situation to be in. I think that, you know, if I was a planner, I'd be looking at all the resources and support I could find. That may be the city or town attorney, it may be the city manager or the town manager or, you know, the county manager. It may be, you know, maybe there's one commissioner who's not rogue and is as uncomfortable as you are about what's going on. The other, and again, depending on the sort of the culture and the process that's used in the community, is the planner could put in writing, this hearing is coming up. This is the procedure that's required under, you know, the open meeting law, the public records law, and they may ignore your memo, but you've put it into the public hearing record, so at least you've made an attempt to highlight the problem and that you know about the problem, and you know, just kind of protect you, but also, you know, again, looking at the code is, you know, the code keeps telling us we're supposed to be making sure the process is open and transparent and fair, and we're protecting the public trust. And there may be small ways you have to go at this to try to overcome an entirely rogue commission.
So I would agree, and I mean, just specifically to the code, the aspirational principles to uphold the integrity of our profession, coupled with the code of conduct that we shall not direct or coerce other professionals to make analysis or reach findings not supported by available evidence. I mean, I think it, whether or not it's a statement made in writing that is on the record or a statement you have made at a meeting, I don't think you need to directly be in conflict with your rogue member, as that may very well be a very uncomfortable situation. But in order to uphold the principles, I would agree with Bob that to put something in writing, whether they listen to your recommendation or not, we've all been in that situation, but you've upheld the code by protecting the integrity of the profession, as well as ensuring that at least you're aware that, you know, there is either information lacking or certain information is not being, or guidance is being not listened to, but they're not deciding to take a recommended course of action.
One other quick comment, again, this depends on what state you're in and whether you have an ethics commission or not, and whether that commission has any powers. As I mentioned, in Massachusetts we have one, and when they find that public officials are acting outside, are acting unethically or in violation of the open meeting or whatever, they can fine, and some of those fines are multiple thousands of dollars. And when they do that, they publish the situation and they publish the names. And so if you have a board that's acting outside, you know, the boundaries of ethics, and you can find that the Ethics Commission has already ruled on a similar situation, and let's just say find the board, you know, $2,000 each, or find the board's chair $10,000, I would bring that to the board's attention. Just maybe put the newsletter, the Ethics Commission newsletter, on the table one night and let them read that what happened to other boards for doing the same bad behavior.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Does the ex parte rule apply only to the Planning Commission or BZAs prior to a public hearing or other voting meeting, or prior to any meeting, for example, a workshop?
Okay, so there's very specific elements that have to be in place for it to be an ex parte contact. There has to be a member of a public body. There has to be contact with someone outside of the public body. The contact has to be about a subject that is currently under consideration by the board, and that contact has to be made in such a way where it is intended to persuade the board member to vote one way or the other. So when the situation involves all 4 of those elements, it's considered an ex parte contact. So if it's something that is currently pending before the board, most definitely it's an ex parte. If it's something that's expected to be before the board very shortly, it's close enough. If it's something that's passed, then probably not. There has to be a vote pending or imminent or soon to become.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and this one is kind of a doozy in that it could probably have its own webcast session, which it has in the past, and I think it's even been ethics cases of the year. I am a private sector planner dealing with AICP public sector planners who seem not to be following the ethical rules in subtle ways. What does the panel recommend as the best way to have a productive discussion about this, short of reporting people to the AICP Commission? My inclination is to go to the Director of Planning, but I'm concerned about retribution from his staff. So it's the age-old relationship between the private sector and the public sector planners.
Well, about the only thing within your control without kicking the hornet's nest is to lead by example. And you might want to put your comments with respect to the process that's gone awry or such in writing, and make a constructive suggestion that they make those considerations before either they proceed or whatever they were intending to do before they do that. And that's about the only way you might be able to fulfill your own ethical obligation, or without, like I said, opening Pandora's box.
I would say a couple of things, and one person's interpretation of unethical behavior is another person's interpretation of upholding an ethics code. So, as we said, there's a lot of gray area here, and I would suggest to whoever, whether you're a public or a private planner, if you have concerns about some other planner's behavior, I would try to, I guess, write it down as explicitly as possible as to what is exactly your concern or what actions are happening that have raised these concerns, and maybe talk to other AICP planners in a hypothetical situation and say, if a planner did this, do you think that's a violation of the code? And see what feedback you get. And if everybody's in agreement that this is a problem, then you may have to either, if you don't know the planner well, maybe you have to talk to their supervisor. If maybe you know the planner well enough, you could just have a sit down with them and just kind of talk generally about, what's happening, and not happening, and how they interpret their actions related to the code. But I would suggest, sort of bouncing this off of a few other planners first before you start moving down the charging people with unethical behavior. Unless it's something so explicitly unethical, then you really kind of need to move forward.
Yeah, and then also I would suggest, obviously understanding the situation, and is it something that they've adopted as a policy or practice that is unethical, or was it a situational something happened that they were having an issue that may be unethical? Not that I would approach the situation, both situations, in a way to confront the person, but understand, make sure under the code that you understand the situation fully, and have all the information as you begin to think about how to remedy the situation.
Okay, thank you. I think we're going to go ahead and close up shop here for the day. So thanks for all of our panelists for joining us today, Casey Bailey and Kristen Kasner, Bob Mitchell and Nancy Latendre. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Connecticut Chapter, for sponsoring. And thanks everyone for listening in. And we will talk next time. Again, you can get all the answers about submitting your CM for this session for credit and all of our future webcasts and recordings and PDF copies at ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. So thanks again, everyone, and we will talk next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.